Hello everyone and welcome back to Rare Japanese Sounds. I'm sorry about the location again. It's because I still don't have a good place to record those videos and it's been pretty hard to record them on a weekly basis. But as the new year approaches, I really wanted to address one topic before we get into 2021. And that topic is what exactly are the new trends that we are seeing and that have been accelerating since 2020 and as we move into 2021. And those trends are, on one hand, new social media like TikTok, and we're going to talk about how Stay With Me has become very popular very recently on this platform and what impact it has for city pop as a hobby for people to listen to, and also as a collectible, because that's one of the purpose of this channel, to discuss city pop not just as a genre of music, but also as something that can be collected. The second trend we're going to talk about is the emergence of new influencers, we can say. And what I'm referring to specifically here is Hololive and the English variant of Hololive. If, like me, you don't know what that is, at least I didn't know what it was until like 2 weeks ago, I'm going to explain to you what Hololive is and what the importance of it is for city pop and its consumption by people. And thirdly, we're going to talk about the role that YouTube has in how people discover and consume city pop, how they listen to the genre, and how the fact that more and more artists have recently been authorizing Spotify to use their music, how like a lot of their discographies have been moved to Spotify, what impact this is going to have on the way people discover city pop and how they keep listening to it. So first, a few words about TikTok. If, like me, you're a bit too old to be using it regularly, what is TikTok? Originally, it was a platform that was made to broadcast yourself singing and dancing to certain songs, and now, of course, it has extended way beyond that original purpose. But still, a lot of people are still using it to sing and dance to certain songs, and what happened to Stay With Me by Miki Matsubara is suddenly, and I don't know exactly why, a lot of people started to use that song in their videos. And of course, it's pretty hard to pinpoint exactly what makes one song successful, but suddenly you have thousands of people making videos about it, which means hundreds of thousands or millions of people being exposed to Stay With Me in some shape or form. The consequences of that are, people starting to wonder, yeah, that song is pretty cool. How can I listen to it outside TikTok? So they go on YouTube, Googling the song, and then they, fall into the city pop rabbit hole, which is how most of us are ending up here watching this video. So what are the consequences of this in general? Of course, I'm not going to go into detail about how exactly the song has become popular, what TikTokers are exactly using this video. I'm just talking about the consequences of that. And one big consequences is you now have a different way to discover city pop. Originally, it has almost always been YouTube, thanks to the algorithm, which probably around 2017 started to really push certain city pop songs, and not only city pop, but also Scenery by Ryo Fukui. A lot of Japanese artists, pretty obscure ones like Hiroshi Yoshimura and so on, they have become extremely popular on the platform YouTube, but only thanks to the algorithm really pushing those songs, even though most of the videos weren't monetized, which I think is pretty interesting. But the fact is, YouTube was the only way to discover the songs, and it wasn't something like friends would tell you about mostly. It was something that you discover on your own, and city pop had that kind of you have this feeling of stumbling upon something rare, something hidden, some kind of hidden treasure of music. And it was really a lot of the psychology behind it and why people loved it so much on a personal level. And this also, there is this kind of fake nostalgia and all that, but this is a different story. The fact is, YouTube was the way for people to discover city pop. And now you have a different platform that has the potential to make other specific songs become popular. And this is what happened to Stay With Me. And I want to say it's great that you have multiple ways for people to discover those. That isn't limited to one algorithm pushing the songs to be discovered. One other big consequence of that is you have a different category of people discovering it. People discovering the song on YouTube are, a certain type of people, the type of people who have time to spend on YouTube and time to browse their recommendations and to listen to music. However, TikTok, you have a younger demographic, and you have people who are attracted to the videos for different reasons. They are first attracted to the people making the video as opposed to the music itself. So it's a very different dynamic, and it's pretty interesting to see how things are going to unfold as time goes on. Perhaps the success of Stay With Me will prompt certain TikTokers to use other city pop songs to try and replicate the same success, because if you make a video with a city pop song on it and it has a huge success, then you will be very tempted to use similar songs. So I'm looking forward to see how exactly TikTok changes the game for discovering city pop, and most importantly, how exactly people who discovered city pop that way are going to be interested in buying actual city pop LPs. To be honest though, you don't need a lot of people being very actively winning to buy the album for huge movements in price to happen. Of course, for albums like Rhyme on Time or Timely, those albums are very popular in general. Even though in the West they're pretty niche, but in Japan, those are top 1 albums back in the day. I'm pretty sure both of those were the top selling album back when they were released. So they still have a huge, Tatsuya Yamashita still has a huge following. So it doesn't really count. But when you take artists that are pretty obscure and then become very popular thanks to city pop being popular in the West, if the album only has like 10,000 copies out there, you only need a few hundred people in the West being very actively willing to buy for a price to move very much. But we are getting a bit too much into detail here, and now I want to move on with the second topic, which is Hololive. So what is Hololive? I really had no idea that this thing existed at all, but that was despite living in Japan too. But in Japan, something that is pretty popular is something called VTubers. So what is a VTuber? A VTuber is some kind of subcategory of YouTubers where instead of following a person for their content, their personality, instead you follow the content of a virtual YouTuber, a character that is created and then voice acted by someone. And what you see on the screen is not the actual person, incarnating the character, but like an animation of the character. So this is pretty interesting, and if you don't understand from what I'm saying, just try to Google VTuber or something. The fact is, so this is a new category of YouTuber that was quite popular in Japan, and very recently they have launched an English equivalence. So you have some sort of virtual personalities on YouTube in English. So they have a pretty nice following. I think some of them have more than 1 million subscribers, so it's pretty sizable. The thing is, so some of those VTubers are mostly gaming and others are singing. And the fact is, because those VTubers are supposed to be something that appeals to people who like Japan, it's not like it appeals to people, to random people. It's very targeted to people who like Japan because the concept is from Japan after all. So the songs that they sing when they have their singing segments, some of them of course are English, but a lot of them are Japanese. And well, what kind of Japanese songs are popular in the West? You have some kind of meme songs like Baka Mitai or something, but you also have city pop songs. And that's where you have a category of people who are mostly into maybe VTubers for them playing video games or something, or for the social aspect of watching a gaming streamer, what's basically a gaming streamer with extra content like singing. So you have, again, a different category of people starting to be exposed to city pop, and that reinforces the way that city pop makes people feel. The difference with that is, unlike the traditional way of discovering city pop, which is pretty solitary, something that you discover on your own and that typically you would keep for yourself. In this instance, because people are watching a live stream and they are watching it together, this makes the experience of listening to city pop something collective instead of individual. Again, that's a pretty minute difference, but perhaps those differences will have an impact on the way people feel about city pop and might want to talk about it to their friends. And I think it's extremely important for city pop to thrive as a hobby and as something for people to enjoy collecting and listening to, etc. Now, the last trend I wanted to talk about, and I've noticed this becoming much more important in 2020 than it was in previous years, and it's Japanese artists actually actively starting to use Spotify and other streaming services to upload their albums. This really didn't exist at all in like 5 years ago, and now it's becoming much more common, and that's a great thing. But until now, at least, YouTube was kind of a gray zone where people would upload, any city pop album and all that, hoping that the label wouldn't take them down. And in many cases, the label wouldn't really pay attention. Maybe they would just monetize the video, and sometimes, of course, take down whole channels just for a couple of albums that they didn't have the right to. But, it was just the best way to access city pop legally, because you wouldn't just, in many cases, the albums just didn't have any recent version, any recent CDs or reissue. And in the other cases, they were only available in Japan, so it was not even legal to get them directly. So as you can see, it was pretty difficult to get everything you wanted legally, but now in 2020, artists are actually putting their discography on Spotify. And this is great because it allows people to now just listen to their content on one platform instead of, having to listen to YouTube, which is a bit clunky and you have a lot of ads. It's really not the best platform to listen to city pop, just to listen to a single album. The audio quality isn't the best. So now if people are starting to be able to listen to them through Spotify, that's great, but you are losing that dimension of discovering things and the comment section. You have some kind of trade-off in which the experience becomes more streamlined on one hand, but on the other hand, you lose a lot of the discovering aspect, a lot of hidden nostalgia. And this is something that was really important for city pop just because of the fact that it's this kind of subculture of the internet. And perhaps we're going to lose that, and in 5 years, city pop will be looked at very differently than it was, let's say, 3 years ago, when it was mostly some kind of, people use it to sample vaporwave and future funk, and people then discovered city pop through that, or just through the algorithm. And then people moved on from city pop to maybe Japanese ambient music like Hiroshi Yoshimura, or maybe they moved on to jazz. It was a very different dynamic, and perhaps we're going to lose that if platforms like Spotify start being the main way of people listening to the music. But of course, it doesn't stop people from, keep listening on YouTube, at least right now. As long as labels will allow videos of their albums to be on there, you will still have people discovering through that. But what I want to get at, and from those three trends, is you start seeing the algorithm, and I'm putting that between air quotes, of course. The algorithm is being less important for discovering city pop than it was before. And I think that's great, because at some point you start getting to some kind of critical mass of people actively using YouTube. Like there are only so many people you can reach by just shoving Plastic Love onto the YouTube algorithm. And having those additional channels for discovering that music, having TikTok, having Hololive and other influencers, and having legit platforms, like legal platforms like Spotify, where the albums can be uploaded. This is, in my opinion, at least great for city pop and collecting Japanese music in general. Of course, since this is a channel for collectors too, not just people who enjoy city pop as a dematerialized medium. Back in the day, the only way to listen to your music was to buy the Ride on Time record or the cassette tape, I don't care. Anyway, someday people are going to realize that, the original way to listen to something is through that. And I don't think we're getting a reissue of Ride on Time on vinyl anytime soon. And if we are, it's not going to be a widespread reissue. We have already talked about this, of course, but since this sold so well and it has at least several 100,000 copies out there, they can't make a big reissue. So if there is a reissue someday, it's going to be a pretty limited reissue, maybe a few thousand copies, and it's going to get sold out, because in 2020 we have a culture of things not being available. You're seeing this through like all types of items, from collectibles to video game vinyl releases to even things like graphics card. It's really silly to talk about that, but in 2020, people want their things to be exclusive, and it's going to be the same for vinyl records. Anyway, if you're a city pop collector, if you want to buy city pop records right now, what is your best bet? I would say one possibility is to look at what songs are getting popular right now. So Stay With Me by Miki Matsubara. How do you invest in that? Well, you could buy the 7-inch, you could buy the Pocket Park LP, you could also buy the 12-inch like club version of the single that was released in 2003 and then reissued in 2018. But My point is, you have this approach of looking at individual songs. Of course, Right on Time is one that was popular thanks to Hololive. So you can target individual songs and then look at the albums that they are part of, and getting those particular albums with the hope of them increasing in value. As a collector, I would say stick to very iconic albums with a reminder that an album isn't guaranteed to be popular forever. You have all sorts of ebbs and flows in the way that albums are popular, and the algorithm is responsible for a lot of that. And now you're going to have multiple algorithms and multiple sources influencing how much a particular album is popular at a particular point in time. So my advice to you for this end of 2020 is to concentrate on albums that are rare enough for them not to, move down in price so much just from the continued supply and a decreased demand. So try to avoid albums that are like those two, because the supply is just so huge. At some point, they're going to drop in price. There is just no other way around it. On the other hand, if you enjoy like very rare albums, like maybe albums like Love Trip, Magical, now would be a good time to get those. Because if we are getting into an era where city pop is becoming more and more accepted, more and more popular through a larger segment of the population, as those segments get older, you start, all the way until the 50s, you start seeing a rise in income. And as you have more income, you have more disposable income and more money to spend on things like records. My point is, those records are never going to be worth hundreds of dollars. And if they are, then I will be a millionaire with the rest of my collection. What really has potential to be worth a lot is albums that are genuinely rare, and those albums are usually already expensive. Your other bet is to look at albums that are currently starting to get popular, and it was the case, for instance, for the Katsumi Hori project back in early 2020. In early 2020, the LPs weren't even worth like $50, but now they are worth at least $100 to $200. So you can either target things that are getting popular for a crowd that isn't, it takes a lot of effort to buy a record like Right on Time. You can go on Discogs, but it's not that easy. It's not well known. On eBay, you will practically not find anything. And your other solution is to use something like Buy Yours and Markets to go through Yahoo Auctions. My point is, there is a certain segment of the population that is getting exposed to C-pop, but doesn't really have the means or just the will to buy those albums. And maybe you should target that. Anyway, next up, we're going to have a different discussion about the current market for CD pop, moves in prices, because there have been a lot in this end of 2020. But for this particular topic, I think we've had a good discussion. If you have other things to add or to ask, the comment section is right below. Anyway, this was Very Japanese Sounds. Like always, I hope you had a good time, and until next time, stay tuned.